Today, we're going over some of the most destructive fraud schemes in recorded history. The kind where one man's greed didn't just drain a few wallets but toppled governments, starved entire populations, changed the course of civilizations. And I have to say, I'm genuinely excited about this one. This was because the audacity on display here is something I find both deeply impressive and absolutely infuriating at the same time. Some of these guys walked away rich. Most of them were never seriously punished. And the millions of people left holding the bill had absolutely no idea what hit them. John Law and the Mississippi Bubble. It's 1716 in France, and the country is in a state of total financial ruin. King Louis XIV had just died after 72 years on the throne, and left the French government buried under a mountain of debt so enormous that the state could barely function. Enter a Scottish economist and gambler named John Law, who presents the French government with what he calls a revolutionary solution. Replace all that heavy gold and silver coinage with lightweight paper money backed by the value of France's territories in Louisiana. The Duc d'Orléans, acting as regent for the child king Louis XV, is desperate enough to try it and gives Law permission to set up what is essentially the first French national bank. And for a little while, it actually seems to work. By 1719, Law has merged his bank with a company called the Compagnie du Mississippi. That held the exclusive trading rights to France's Louisiana territory. He begins selling shares in this company to the public, describing the Louisiana colony as an almost impossibly fertile paradise overflowing with gold, silver, and agricultural riches. The French public goes absolutely berserk for it. Shares that originally sold for 500 livres skyrocket to 10,000 livres within a single year as ordinary French citizens, aristocrats. Foreign investors all desperately pour money into the scheme. The streets outside Law's office reportedly became so crowded that people were being crushed in the mob. A hunchbacked man supposedly made a small fortune just by renting out his back as a writing desk so investors could sign their share certificates on the spot. I mean, you genuinely cannot make this stuff up. The problem, of course, is that Louisiana was not a paradise. It was a malarial swamp with almost no infrastructure, populated by a few hundred struggling colonists who were fighting disease, starvation, brutal conditions on a daily basis. There was no gold. There was no silver. The entire thing was a fiction built on Law's promotional materials and the French government's willingness to keep printing money to feed the frenzy. When the reality of Louisiana slowly made its way back to France in 1720, the panic that followed was immediate and catastrophic. Investors rushed to cash out their shares all at once. The paper money became worthless overnight. The entire scheme collapsed in a matter of months. France was so thoroughly traumatized by the experience that the country refused to trust paper currency again for nearly 80 years. The damage went far beyond financial losses alone. The Mississippi Bubble wiped out the savings of an entire generation of French citizens, from wealthy nobles who had bet everything on Law's promises to ordinary working people who would scrape together whatever they had to buy in. The French government, which had been complicit in the whole thing from the very beginning, emerged from the collapse even more discredited and financially desperate than before. John Law himself fled France in disguise and died broke in Venice in 1729. That honestly feels like a wildly insufficient punishment for a man who helped destabilize an entire country. Historians have argued pretty convincingly that the economic desperation and deep mistrust of financial institutions that the Mississippi Bubble created were major contributing factors to the social conditions that eventually exploded into the French Revolution in 1789. The Diamond Necklace Affair. Now, this one is incredible, and I genuinely cannot believe it worked as long as it did. In 1785, a con artist named Jean de Valois Saint-Remy hatched one of the most audacious schemes in history, targeting the French monarchy directly. The setup involved a legendary diamond necklace that had originally been commissioned for Louis XV's mistress, a piece so extravagant and expensive that even the king himself couldn't justify purchasing it. The jewelers who made it were now desperate to recoup their investment. Jean saw an opening. Using forged letters written in the Queen's handwriting and an actress she hired to impersonate Marie Antoinette in a moonlit garden meeting, she convinced a powerful and deeply gullible cardinal named Louis de Rohan that the Queen secretly wanted the necklace but couldn't acquire it through official channels. The cardinal, eager to regain the Queen's favor after falling out with her years earlier, agreed to purchase the necklace on credit and hand it over to what he believed was a royal intermediary. The necklace was promptly broken apart and its diamonds sold off across Europe. When the jewelers came looking for their first payment and the whole scheme unraveled, the cardinal was arrested, publicly humiliated, and put on trial. You got to be kidding me. The Queen, who had absolutely nothing to do with any of this, was named in every pamphlet, every rumor, every piece of street gossip that flooded Paris in the months that followed. The French public, who already resented Marie Antoinette for her spending habits and her Austrian origins, became convinced that she had masterminded the entire theft herself. She was guillotined in October of 1793. Jeanne de Valois Saint-Remy, the woman who actually started all of this, died falling from a window in London in 1791. Gregor MacGregor and the Kingdom of Poyais. Okay, so I need you to understand that everything I'm about to tell you actually happened. In 1821, a Scottish soldier and adventurer named Gregor MacGregor arrived in London and Edinburgh and announced to the world that he was the cazique, essentially the sovereign ruler, of a magnificent Central American nation called Poyais, located along the coast of Honduras. He had maps, he had a currency, he had an elaborate published guidebook describing Poyais as a lush and prosperous British-style colony with its own capital city, a cathedral, a functioning bank, a thriving port. Farmland so fertile that settlers could expect to become genuinely wealthy within just a few years of arrival. He sold bonds, land grants, and emigration packages to eager Scottish investors, netting somewhere around £200,000. That, in modern terms, works out to the equivalent of several billion pounds. Absolutely remarkable. The first ship carrying Scottish settlers arrived in Poyais in 1823. What they found was a nearly uninhabited stretch of jungle on the banks of a river, with no city, no cathedral, no bank, no infrastructure of any kind. There was a handful of rotting wooden huts from an old, long-abandoned settlement, and essentially nothing else. The settlers, who had sold their homes and businesses to fund their passage and their land purchases, were now stranded in a disease-ridden wilderness with almost no supplies and nowhere to go. By the time rescue ships arrived several months later, more than half of the original group had died from tropical diseases, starvation, and exposure. MacGregor, meanwhile, was comfortably settled in Paris, where he had already begun pitching Poyais to a whole new group of French investors. He was never convicted of any crime. He eventually moved to Venezuela, where he died peacefully in 1845 at the age of 58 and was buried with full military honors. Enron. By the mid-1990s, Enron was considered one of the most innovative and admired companies in the entire United States. Founded in 1985 as a natural gas pipeline company based in Houston, it had transformed itself under CEO Kenneth Lay and later President and COO Jeffrey Skilling into an energy trading giant that seemed to generate breathtaking profits year after year. Fortune magazine named it America's most innovative company for 6 consecutive years. Its stock price climbed to $90 per share at its peak in 2000. Employees, pensioners, and outside investors had collectively poured billions into the company. They had every reason to feel good about it. What almost none of them knew was that Enron's apparent profits were an almost entirely fabricated illusion, maintained through a web of hundreds of offshore entities and shell companies specifically engineered to hide the company's real debts and inflate its reported revenues on paper. Skilling and a small circle of executives, working closely with their auditors at Arthur Andersen, one of the most prestigious accounting firms in the world at the time, had constructed a system so deliberately opaque that even most of Enron's own employees had no clear picture of what the company actually owned or owed. In August of 2001, an executive named Sharon Watkins sent a memo directly to Kenneth Lay, warning him that the whole structure was going to collapse. By October of 2001, it did. The stock price, which had sat at $90 just a year earlier, fell below $1. Enron filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy on December 2nd of 2001. That, at the time, was the largest corporate bankruptcy in American history. The human cost was staggering and hit people who had nothing to do with any of the fraud at the executive level. Enron's 25,000 employees lost their jobs because so many of them had been encouraged to invest their retirement savings in company stock. They also lost approximately $2 billion in pension funds almost overnight. Arthur Andersen collapsed alongside the company it had been helping deceive the public for years, putting an additional 28,000 people out of work globally after it was convicted of obstruction of justice for shredding Enron-related documents. Kenneth Lay was convicted of fraud and conspiracy in 2006, but died of a heart attack in July of that year before sentencing. Jeffrey Skilling was sentenced to 24 years in federal prison, later reduced. In the aftermath of everything, Congress passed the Sarbanes-Oxley Act in 2002. That held CEOs and CFOs personally responsible for the accuracy of their company's financial statements, meaningful reform, but roughly a decade too late for the people it should have protected. Bernie Madoff. I genuinely don't know where to start with this man. Bernard Madoff was not some unknown hustler operating out of a basement. He was a former chairman of the NASDAQ Stock Exchange, one of the most respected and well-connected figures on Wall Street. The founder of a highly successful investment securities firm that had been operating legitimately since 1960. So when wealthy individuals, major banks, pension funds, charitable foundations handed their money over to his separate investment advisory business, they had every reason to believe it was safe. What they didn't know was that Madoff had been running a massive Ponzi scheme for at least 2 decades, simply paying his existing investors with money from new investors while fabricating monthly account statements showing steady, reliable returns of between 10 and 15%, regardless of what the actual market was doing. A financial analyst named Harry Markopolos figured out that what Madoff was doing was mathematically impossible as early as 1999 and submitted detailed, specific reports to the Securities and Exchange Commission multiple times over the following 9 years. The SEC investigated Madoff on several occasions and found nothing wrong each time. When the 2008 financial crisis hit, and Madoff's investors rushed to withdraw their money all at once, he finally had to admit to his sons that the entire investment advisory side of the business was, in his own words, one big lie. His sons turned him in to the FBI the following morning. The paper value of the accounts at the time of the collapse was approximately $64 billion, with real losses to investors totaling more than $18 billion. Hundreds of charitable organizations were wiped out entirely. Retirement funds were destroyed. Family savings accumulated over generations were simply gone. The 2008 mortgage crisis. By the mid-2000s, American banks and mortgage lenders had built what I genuinely believe is one of the most deliberately dishonest financial systems in modern history. Loan originators across the country were handing out mortgages to borrowers with no income, no job, no assets, the so-called ninja loans, falsifying application documents, concealing balloon payment terms, generally doing whatever it took to close as many loans as possible. This was because they were immediately packaging those loans up and selling them off to investment banks on Wall Street. The investment banks then sliced and repackaged them into mortgage-backed securities and sold those to pension funds, international banks, and insurance companies. Credit rating agencies, who were supposed to independently assess the risk of all these securities, were issuing top ratings to what were essentially bundles of loans designed to fail. When the housing market peaked in 2006 and borrowers began defaulting in massive numbers, the entire system started unraveling at terrifying speed. Lehman Brothers filed for bankruptcy in September of 2008. The global financial system came within hours of a complete collapse. The Great Recession that followed produced the highest rates of unemployment and home foreclosure in the United States since the Great Depression. Median household wealth in America fell 35% between 2005 and 2011, dropping from $106,591 to $68,839. In the zip codes where more than 15% of the original mortgages had involved fraudulent origination. Home prices fell an average of 44.6%. Tens of millions of families lost their homes and their savings. The legal consequences for the banks that had the whole thing were largely settlement payments that amounted to a fraction of the profits they had already made along the way.